What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is based on one of video games' most successful fighting game franchises of all time, and I'm talking about Street Fighter. Street Fighter the Animated Series aired in 1995, consisting of 2 seasons with a total of 26 episodes. While using some events that occurred from the 1994 film Street Fighter the Movie and a few characters from the video games such as Street Fighter II, Alpha, and Turbo, the story roughly focuses on Colonel William F. Guile as he works undercover as part of the Street Fighter International Peacekeeping Force. His mission is to put a stop to a ruthless dictator that goes by the name General M Bison and his empire called Shadaloo from overtaking and controlling the government and the world. Every episode mostly starts off with Guile as he's seen traveling from one location to another participating in these tournaments. As soon as he's done defeating his opponent or happens to be somewhere wandering in the town he's currently in, he always gets these ridiculous secret codes in a disguise hinting that a mission is in order. Later, whether it's Guile or another character, they happen to locate a secret hidden area mostly in a sketchy rusty-ass location where they meet a guy named Asher who runs all the operations behind the scenes for the Street Fighter team. Asher basically lays down all the facts and objectives to Guile and tells him who's involved, and in this case, most of the time being M Bison. He then initiates a protocol that allows Guile to choose whom he wants to work with as his teammates. So aside from Guile, who's the leader of the Street Fighters and once part of the Air Force who follows the 3 words of honor, which are discipline, justice, and commitment, within the files of the database, you have some official members and occasional allies like CHUN LI, a news reporter, BLANKA, a once human now turned into a mutant by an experiment, Ryu and Ken, both well-known martial artists, CAMMY, an operative/agent, T-Hawk, a Native American warrior, E. Honda, a sumo wrestler who happens to be a technician, DJ, a professional kickboxer, Sawada, an officer of the AN military, Fei Long, a martial artist/movie star, DHALSIM, a scientist and yoga master, Rose, a fortune teller, and Delta Red consisting of members Burke, Rory, and Celia. As for the villains, aside from M Bison you have ZANGIEF, SAGAT, Akuma, Balrog, VEGA, Satin Hammer, La Lupa, and Sodom/Birdie. Despite having a good amount of characters, a lot of them barely appear in the show as some are only shown in 1 episode if not 3 the most. Within these 26 episodes, there's a huge difference between Season 1 and Season 2. For example, the tone in Season 1 is full of jokes, clumsy writing, and unintentional goofy humor that would possibly go over the head, but I was lucky enough to catch it and actually laughed at them. There's a lot of disrespecting going on during conversations which really doesn't make the viewer take anyone seriously as everyone just plans on making their own rules. You have instances where Ryu was brutally damaged during a mission, and instead of asking if he's okay, even while having foam in his mouth, which is a very concerning matter if you ask me, Guile just stands there carelessly and carries on to make sure everyone else on the island is okay. Then you have another moment where a secret cave is on the verge of exploding, and after failing another agenda to rule the world yet again, Zangief was previously knocked into the water and begs M Bison to wait for him. But instead, M Bison looks at him like a fool and doesn't give a shit, leaving him to die, and trust me, there's so many more to list. When it comes to character portrayals, everyone is mostly on par except for Ryu and Ken, who are God-unknowingly free agents who accompany the Street Fighters on a few tasks, but their agenda is always concerned about money, despite Ken being the son of the 5th richest man in the world, finding treasures, and Ken desperately seeking for women. And because of that, Guile thinks both of them are absolute idiots and is literally shamed to work with them as the first episode clearly shows his unlikable feelings towards them. Unfortunately, it doesn't even end there. One of the funniest things I found in this show is that every time Guile is seen in a fight, after he wins by mostly cheating and using his chi powers, which I assume is illegal, he constantly gets booed and people start throwing shit at him in the ring. Then you have moments where the Street Fighters are on a mission, and they try to be sneaky using tactical stealth, but instead, you have characters landing in trees which shows they have no idea how a parachute works, and whenever they think they're in the clear, they're already caught by making such an obvious entrance that's so noticeable to the villains. Last but not least, since Guile is in just about every episode, there's an abundance of scenes where his facial expressions are just so ridiculous that sometimes you just have to ask yourself who agreed to let this slide in the production. Not to mention, his relationship with Escher is a joke since all he cares about is the team and Guile continues to disobey orders. It's just something you have to see for yourself. Regardless of all that nonsense, here's where the show surprisingly does decent enough to say the least. For starters, we get story arcs involving several characters' origins, like how Guile was bullied as a kid which influenced him to join the army, Blanka and how DHALSIM transformed his image, which is a conflicting story throughout, and the death of Chun Li's father, which allowed her to seek vengeance on Bison. Next, you have a few acceptable relationships to further dive into the characters' emotional past and present, like love interest, accepting of each other's hearts despite of appearances, and love triangles involving obsessions and misunderstandings. As for the villains, well, there's not much to say other than M Bison being a cliche of a typical villain who has a plan, fails, blames other people, and then retreats. One thing I do like is their ability to show the fans of the franchise special moves that are popular throughout the game, like Guile's Sonic Boom, Chun Li's Spinning Bird Kick, and many more. However, the famous Hadoukens from Ryu and Ken, which are probably everyone's favorite thing to say or yell, is likely the worst and less enthusiastic way they could have ever be expressed in a show. A little more effort could have gone a long way. When you get to Season 2, the show does a great job in switching up the animation style, almost giving us that great anime feel, which is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, not every episode has it, but there's enough to make you wonder if you're even watching the same show, and to make things a little realistic and dark, they included the war on Middle East and imperialism. Every episode somewhat continues from the previous one with minor flashbacks involving a specific storyline. Unlike Season 1, this season changes a few things like having Guile take a back seat in a few episodes, or having Ryu becoming more serious with his martial arts, minus Ken who remains the same and possibly more of an idiot, and still has that god-awful voice. In one episode, we get introduced to a character named the Warrior King, whose mission is to find an orb that is traveling through time and ends up getting into the wrong hands of M Bison. With the Street Fighters assisting and building a romantic relationship with Chun Li, the Warrior King briefly gets a hold of it to only have the orb slip away again. This causes him to re-enter the portal as gaining control of the orb will protect his world. This is actually the beginning of a shared universe, as the Warrior King also makes appearances in other animated series like Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, Savage Dragon, and Wing Commander. Sadly, I don't have a favorite episode, but I do have a few likable story arcs involving Blanka, because throughout the whole show, he searches for a cure in regards to his appearance, as everyone calls him a monster, but when he does, he sacrifices the chance to do so, for a selfless cause, and later ends up mutating even more. You kinda feel bad for the guy, hoping he'll find the happiness he deserves. Another one briefly involves T-Hawk and his love interest Satin Hammer. Despite being a villain, her motives kinda make sense, giving you to almost feel sorry for her. And last, there's also one where CAMMY gets captured by M Bison and ends up betraying the Street Fighters team. Luckily, this story plays out all the way until the last episode, giving it a conclusion that no one expected. By the time you get to the last episode, you kinda get invested in some characters, as some things are still left unsaid, as a lot of characters didn't get a proper ending, so you're basically left to wonder what happened to everyone else. This show starts off mediocre at its best, at least in the first season. If it wasn't for the accurate costume designs, new graphics, decent music, better storylines in Season 2, and pretty good voice acting for some characters, this show would have been an absolute disaster. But after watching, you realize it's definitely a good time pass and a little entertaining to say the least. Although being loosely based off the movie and video games, since there's a lot of inaccuracy involving story arcs, with its negative reviews and inconsistencies, I personally didn't think it was that bad, but it definitely failed to capture what the games did and lost its value to attract an audience. Therefore, Street Fighter the Animated Series gets a C+. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews, and stay tuned for the next episode.